Welcome to the Monty Collier Report. I'm Monty Collier. In a video titled Geisler's Farmer Example on the Dividing Line, James White came out and publicly endorsed the so-called presuppositional apologetics of Cornelius Van Til and Greg Bahnsen. He endorsed their writings. In doing so, James White has endorsed two men who were not Calvinists. I don't even believe they were Christians, to be honest with you. The men rejected sola scriptura. Greg Bahnsen was a follower of Cornelius Van Til, so I'll just speak about Van Til. Cornelius Van Til taught that all the doctrines of Scripture were apparently contradictory, and that these apparent contradictions cannot ever be reconciled by men, nor should men even try. This means Van Til doesn't believe in harmonizing Scripture. Anybody who was associated or around Van Til who tried to harmonize Scripture, who tried to show, for example, how James chapter 2 does not logically contradict Romans chapter 3. Anybody who tried to harmonize those two chapters, for example, Van Til would fuss at them and have a fit. He would tell them, you should not try to harmonize this. Well, this is completely contrary to John Calvin, who of course harmonized the teachings of Paul and the teachings of James in his Institutes of the Christian Religion. Gordon Clark was attacked viciously by Van Til and his little cronies for teaching that apparent contradictions can be harmonized. Gordon H. Clark taught that God's sovereignty did not logically contradict man's responsibility, and Cornelius Van Til had a fit. He said, how dare this Gordon Clark try to harmonize the sovereignty of God and the responsibility of man. Van Til was asserting that if you're going to believe in human responsibility, you must believe that man has free will. And of course, if that's what you think the definition of human responsibility consists of, it consists in man having free will, of course it's going to contradict God's sovereignty, because in Calvinism we believe in absolute predestination. But Gordon H. Clark demonstrated that human responsibility was not based on free will. It's based on God's sovereignty, God's sovereign ability to call man to give a response for who he is and what he did, and it's also based on man's knowledge of the law. Free will has nothing to do with it, and it is not found in Scripture at any point. Clark was a Calvinist. Van Til was not. That's why Van Til was having a fit. Van Til rejected sola scriptura, the perspicuity of Scripture. You can't believe in the perspicuity of Scripture and teach that all the doctrines of Scripture are apparently contradictory. He didn't just stop there, ladies and gentlemen. Van Til taught that all of man's knowledge is apparently contradictory. Cornelius Van Til taught that the mind of man does not coincide at any point with the mind of God. There is no coincidence, is what Van Til taught. Now, since God knows everything, then it logically follows that man can know nothing. He can't get away from that. Of course, when that was pointed out to Cornelius Van Til, Van Til had a fit and said, you're making God subject to logic. You're a rationalist. That was his comeback. Anybody who believed that the Bible was logically consistent, or that the laws of logic could be deduced from Scripture, Van Til called that person a rationalist and asserted that they weren't Christian. Van Til was an irrationalist, like Roman Catholics. And Van Til's teaching that the Bible cannot be understood is a Roman Catholic teaching. That's what the Catholics teach, that men cannot understand the Bible, so they don't need to read it, they just need to do what the Pope says. Van Til is just the Pope in that situation there. We need to be very clear here. I need to make sure everybody knows that Cornelius Van Til did not believe in the Trinity. The man taught that God is one person in three persons. He did not teach that there was one God in three persons. He taught that there was one person in three persons. That's what he said God was. He said God is one person in three persons. That is not the Trinity. This is what Van Til taught in several of his books. He was asked to explain. He never did. If you're going to go and look at his apologetic method, you're going to run into Cornelius Van Til's heretical teaching on the Trinity. I don't know why James White didn't warn his listeners about that. He should have. James White wrote a book on the Trinity. I don't recall James White claiming that God is one person in three persons in that book, but Van Til, in his Introduction to Systematic Theology, claims that God is one person in three persons. Van Til's followers repeat that all the time. James Jordan, one of Van Til's followers, is running around saying that God is one God in three gods. People, is this a Calvinist? No. Van Til was not a Calvinist. Okay, I don't know what you want to call him, but he wasn't Reformed. Well, Cornelius Van Til and Greg Bonzen's teachings have led other men into developing their own heresy. The heresy I'm speaking of here is Federal Vision. Douglas Wilson is the leader of the Federal Vision heresy. He's a Van Tilian. If you look at the proponents of Federal Vision, the heresy of Federal Vision, you will see that almost all of them, if not all of them, are Van Tilians. They all hold to the heresy of irreconcilable paradox, which they learned from Cornelius Van Til, which now James White is telling you all to go and learn. You're not going to study Van Til's apologetic method without learning his heresy of irreconcilable paradox. It's not going to happen. It permeates his writings. You can get any number of his books. It's all through his writings. If you believe in irreconcilable paradox and that the Bible's filled with it, then Van Til's the guy for you. But if you are a Calvinist, if you believe the Bible is logically consistent, you might want to ask James White, what have you been smoking? Because, you got to be high to think this guy's a Calvinist. Van Til's not a Calvinist in any sense of the word. People, Cornelius Van Til didn't even believe in presuppositional apologetics. The man is on record throughout his entire career stating that he believed the classical arguments for God's existence are valid in some sense. He was asked by Gordon Clark, among others, to please demonstrate. Of course, he never did, but he always maintained that the arguments were valid in some sense. Well, if you're a presuppositional apologist, that means you don't believe the arguments for God's existence are valid in any sense. Yeah, if you did, you'd be an evidentialist. Okay, not a presuppositionalist. This is just basic, but the followers of Van Til don't believe in basic logic. They hold to misology. They're irrationalists.